Hello whisky fans and welcome back. On this channel I do try to make an effort to stick to reviewing things that are at least reasonably available and hopefully affordable too, but this review I'm going to be looking at something that sadly none of you are going to be able to get hold of, because this is my Peated Infinity Bottle. So it's full now, so I've put the video out where I started these infinity bottles just before I'll release this video. So this bottle is full, you're not going to get anything else in there. So I'm switching over to the kind of one in, one out process with this now. Every time I finish a bottle, I'll have a dram and then replace that with the last dram from the bottle that's on its way out. And as I'm starting to drink this Peated Infinity Bottle, I thought I'd share with you guys how it's going and what it's like. One interesting thing about doing these infinity bottles is I obviously buy a lot more peated whiskey than unpeated, because this is my peated one and this is the unpeated. So I'm actually buying over twice as much peated whiskey as unpeated. And I knew there'd be more peated, but that's a little bit surprising that it's to that extent. That's upside down. Don't know what I'm going to do with that. It's a bit big. It's annoying me already. So if you guys are interested, I'll probably do maybe an annual catch up with the Infinity Bottle, see how it's progressing. Maybe do that at the end of the Whisky Advent calendar, which seems to have become an annual feature. That's our 50ml measure, so that'll be replaced shortly. In the glass, let's see what we've got. Might just leave the cork out of that one, let a little bit more air get to it. Always a good thing. So a little brief rundown of what I've got in this one. There are 3 different batches of Lafroig 10 cask strength. I've got some of the Highland Park cask strength batch 1 in there, which I think is the strongest whiskey that I've put in. Got a little bit of Lagavulin 12. Got some of the Ben Bracken Mystery Isla malt, the 22-year-old stuff, which I think is the oldest whiskey that I've got in there, but at 40% it's also the weakest whiskey. Got a little bit of Toravaig Alt Glen, which I think is probably, it's hard to tell for sure, but probably the youngest whiskey that I've got in there. I've got 4 different Ardbeg committee releases, including Ardbeg Fermutation, which is probably the most expensive thing that I've put in here. I've got a little bit of the Kilchoman 8-year-old Mezcal cask finish, which is probably the most small batch whiskey that's gone into this. And I've got a little bit of Smokehead, the original standard Smokehead as well, which is probably the cheapest thing that I've put in. I have done a little bit of a calculation. I've worked out the ABV resulting from this one, and according to my working it's coming out at 50.9% ABV. So it's surprising that you don't need to add too many low strength whiskies into an infinity bottle, because there's a lot of cask strength and high proof stuff gone in there, but just a few low strength whiskies does knock the ABV down quite a lot, but 51% should still be pretty good. So Whisky Lock, extremely exclusive, extremely small batch, limited edition Peated Infinity Bottle on the nose. So as you'd expect, lots of really nice, heavily medicinal, heavily peated Islay style South Shore Islay notes on the nose. In particular, there's a strong ashiness to the peat in this, extremely medicinal. You can tell that there's a lot of Ardbeg and Lafroig gone into this. There's also a really interesting sour fruitiness, which reminds me a lot of Kalila, which is surprising because there's no Kalila in this. Another thing that's quite surprising, really is quite a sourness to it, and I like that, but there's a sharp, sour, acidic note to this whiskey. But what I was going to say, another surprising thing is there's a distinct dark fruits, almost cherry fruitiness to the nose on this, and I don't really know where that's coming from, but very nice. Also, and this is something that I'm really pleased about, is there's a distinct musty cheesiness on the nose to this whiskey, which really reminds me of the Ardbeg Fermutation. Now, I promise I haven't tipped half of that bottle into this. I've tried to split everything equally, but it makes you wonder if that cheesiness that I was getting on the nose of the Ardbeg fermentation is such a dominant flavour that it's able to show itself above all of the other, well, not above, but able to cut through the mix of all the other flavours that you've got in this. Also getting a little note of chili chocolate on the nose, and a surprising amount of oakiness and wood spice. And again, I kind of think, where is that coming from? I think that the oakiness in this, it's not really present to this extent in many of the whiskies that's gone into it. Anyway, let's see how it tastes. Incredibly robust, sweet and medicinal, salty, smoky, medicinal peat, an absolute Isle bomb of a whiskey. So I'm actually really pleasantly surprised how well this one has gone, because there's always the risk that you blend lots of good stuff together in an infinity bottle and it's kind of quality in, crap out. But this has gone incredibly well. Couldn't be happier so far. Again, lots of ashy medicinal peat on the palate, lots of sour fruity maltiness, again quite a decent amount of wood spice, definitely quite oak forward with lots of notes of toasty oak and a nice salty edge to the palate of this whiskey. Actually reminds me quite a bit of like one of the very early batches of Laphroaig 10 cask strength back in the days when Laphroaig was a much more dry experience and it had a much more dry, bitter, salty edge. It was a bit more of an aggressive, less of a sweet whiskey, which again is strange because I haven't got any of those old Laphroaigs in this. As for the finish, really good finish. It's long, burnt peat, toasted oak and a nice salinity. So really pleased with this one so far. It's interesting how many flavours have popped up out of the mix that aren't obviously from any one thing. When you do any sort of home blending or infinity bottles, I kind of expected it to be more of an averaging process, that you would get sort of, and I said this in the video when I started this infinity bottle, that you get an average representation of the whiskies that go into the bottle, and it would be kind of like a representative model of the way the whiskey world is in that year, because all the outlier whiskies would sort of be smoothed out a bit and you'd get a very average representation of the whiskey that goes in, and that's not really happened. I'm really surprised at how many tertiary flavours have popped up in this one, how many flavours there are that it's not easy to see where those flavours have come from, and I feel like a lot of those flavours are a mixing and a marrying of different flavours that create something new, which is a really pleasant surprise. Anyway, I hope that you guys have found this video interesting and that it's inspired some of you to give home blending another go and maybe revisit your infinity bottles. I'm going to go and enjoy the rest of this one. See you next time, and cheers.